Morgan, who was the first woman to earn an architect's license in California, was a prolific designer of hundreds of buildings, namely the Hearst Castle at San Simeon. By Alexandra Lange. Through fire and shock, the Great San Francisco Earthquake of 1906 destroyed more than 80% of the city's buildings. The Grand Fairmont Hotel, only days from opening, was gutted by flames, leaving only a shell. The hotel's owners, determined to rebuild, turned to a young architect, Julia Morgan. Only 3 years earlier she had built a bell tower on the campus of Mills College, and it had withstood the earthquake unscathed, proof that Morgan was as experienced in reinforced concrete as she was in European design. But word that a woman had been hired to renovate the luxurious hotel was met with astonishment. Was the building really in the charge of a woman? Jane Armstrong, a reporter for the San Francisco Call, asked the project's foreman in 1907 on a visit to the hotel's ballroom after Morgan had restored it to its original splendor. Yes, the foreman answered, it was in the charge of a real architect, and her name happens to be Julia Morgan, but it might as well be John Morgan. To him it was work well done, Armstrong wrote. After she toured the building with Morgan, she added, she was so inspired that she wanted to emblazon above it the part that a woman has played. As the first woman to receive an architect's license in California, in 1904, Morgan early on was used to skepticism about her abilities. But she came to allay those doubts by building a sterling reputation with projects now known around the world, including the Asilomar Conference Grounds on the Monterey Peninsula and, most notably, the Hearst Castle at San Simeon. By the time she retired in 1951, at 79, she had designed hundreds of buildings and sites. Morgan was born in San Francisco on January 20, 1872. Her father, Charles Bill Morgan, had settled in California in 1867, having reached it from Brooklyn by sailing around the tip of South America accompanied by his new bride, Eliza Woodland Parmilly. A mining engineer, he had seen the West as the place to make his fortune. Morgan and her 4 siblings were raised in a large Victorian house across San Francisco Bay in Oakland. Morgan enrolled at the University of California, Berkeley, where she studied civil engineering. When she was a senior, she met the architect Bernard Maybeck, who would go on to design one of the defining works of the Bay Area School of Architecture, the First Church of Christ, Scientist 1910 in Berkeley, as well as the Neoclassical Palace of Fine Arts 1915 in San Francisco. Maybeck was a charismatic teacher and mentor who encouraged many of his students, including Morgan, to study, as he had, at the École des Beaux-Arts in Paris, then the world's most prestigious architecture school. She applied, and at 26 became the first woman to pass the school's entrance exams. The San Francisco Examiner hailed her achievement with the headline, "California Girl Wins High Honor." Morgan returned to Oakland in 1902, degree in hand, and soon established an independent practice. She adopted the dark suit and tie of the rank-and-file male architect, but with a skirt rather than trousers. Eschewing a regular purse, which would encumber her hands, she utilized suit pockets to carry necessaries, Eleanor Ritchie wrote in the book Eminent Women of the West 1975. Her first office, at 456 Montgomery Street in San Francisco, was also destroyed by the 1906 earthquake, an event that precipitated a construction boom. At the time, a growing women's network, developed through campaigns for the abolition of slavery, temperance and women's suffrage, was primed to help a female professional. And in 1903, Mills College, a women's school in Oakland, asked Morgan to design El Campanile, a 72-foot-tall reinforced concrete bell tower in the red-roofed mission style then popular in the West. Like many of her Beaux-Arts-trained contemporaries, Morgan was a master of historical styles and worked in many genres specific to California. The Young Women's Christian Association also became a major client, for which Morgan designed a dozen centers on the West Coast, as well as one in Honolulu. In 1913 Phoebe Apperson Hearst, whom she had met through Maybeck, hired Morgan to transform 30 acres on the Monterey Peninsula into the YWCA Conference Center, renamed Asilomar, or Refuge by the Sea. Over the next 16 years Morgan would add 16 buildings, most in a rustic arts and crafts style featuring dramatic exposed wood trusses, redwood walls and stone fireplaces. Asilomar became a state park in 1956, and in 1987 Morgan's buildings were added to the National Register of Historic Places. Phoebe Hearst also introduced Morgan to her son, the newspaper tycoon William Randolph Hearst, for whom she designed the block-long white stucco Examiner building in 1915. 4 years later he hired her again, initially asking her to help him build a modest bungalow at his ranch in San Simeon, Calif. Soon his ambitions changed. The commission would turn into an extraordinary, long-running architect-client relationship that would produce a vast castle of fantastic, pan-European architecture augmented by fragments of buildings, mostly from Italy and Spain, that Hearst had collected and shipped to California. Morgan spent 25 years working continuously with Hearst, spending a majority of her weekends on site. The castle became Morgan's most famous work. She could do any style, castles for Hearst up at Mount Shasta, Italianate, stucco, little cottages and craftsman buildings, said Lynn Forney McMurray, the daughter of Morgan's longtime secretary, Lillian Forney, and her goddaughter. Her houses were built from the inside out. She thought about how the people were to live. That was what was important to her.